The mind is everything. What you think, you become. There is a battle within you that nobody sees, not yet. A quiet conflict between what you think and who you feel you are destined to become. You wake up most days with 1,000 thoughts swirling, shaping your mood, your courage, your expectations. You may not have paid much attention to them, but they are writing the script of your life. And the problem is not your circumstances, it is your mind. You believe thoughts are fleeting. You believe they float lightly and do not matter. But that belief is your undoing, because every thought you tolerate is a seed you plant in the soil of your character. I know what it feels like to wake up thinking you are not enough, to carry self-doubt as a shadow that follows you into every room, to look at others who appear more confident, more successful, more certain, and believe that perhaps they belong closer to greatness than you do. That is the lie of the mind, that your worth is determined by what you see, not by what you think. But there is another way, a way to flip the script, a way where your thoughts become your allies, not your jailers. This book is a journey into that way. It is not a philosophy of positivism or empty slogans. It is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about training your mind, transforming it from a mirror of your past into the architect of your future. Because what you think becomes your reality. What you feed in your head decides who you become. I will show you not with theory, but with stories, not with lectures, but with lived transformation, how to shift your internal landscape. How to take the chaotic whispers of doubt and turn them into daily affirmations of empowerment. How to choose your thoughts so you stop reacting and start directing. This is not a quick fix. It is not a one-time pep talk. It is a process, a discipline, and it begins with honesty. In your mind lies your power. So consider this your invitation to step into the space where your thoughts can serve you rather than sabotage you. To learn the foundational idea that thought precedes being, and that by mastering your inner world, you become the author of your life. You will not just read about thinking differently, you will become someone who thinks differently. And as that happens, you will feel your world changing around you. Take a moment and reflect on one thought that has repeated in your mind today, one thought that tells you something about who you are or what you can become. Write it down mentally. This book is for that thought and for what you will choose to think instead. Chapter 1. From Self-Talk to Self-Truth. It began when I realized my life was echoing back the words I had been whispering to myself for years. Not the loud words I spoke in meetings, not the polished sentences I said to others, but the quiet ones I muttered in the mirror, the words I never questioned because I believed they were harmless. You are not ready. You always mess this up. You will never be like them. These were not statements, they were seeds. I planted them every day unconsciously, and my life was the harvest. I thought I had a discipline problem, a time management problem, a focus issue. But I was wrong. I had a thought problem, and no strategy, no productivity system, no external success would ever fix that unless I rewired what I believed when I was alone with myself. This is where most people are trapped, not by chains, not by walls, but by internal dialogue. The voice in their mind is not their own, but they have accepted it as truth. It is the voice of every parent who spoke in anger, every teacher who underestimated them, every friend who betrayed them, every mistake they replay on loop. They hear that voice and think, this is just who I am. But no, that is not who you are. That is who you have been thinking, and what you think you become. I know this truth not because I read it in a book, but because I lived its opposite for too long. I tried to outrun my thoughts with action. I pushed myself harder, slept less, worked longer, smiled brighter. I chased external validation to silence internal doubt. But the thoughts always caught up. They crawled back in when the lights were off. They whispered louder after the applause faded, and I began to see the terrible truth: effort cannot erase identity. You cannot outperform the story you keep telling yourself. That is when I began the real work, not of doing more, but of becoming more conscious. I sat down with myself not with shame, but with curiosity. I asked myself, what are the thoughts I allow on repeat that I would never say to someone I love? And the answers hurt. They were ugly, but they were honest. And once you face the lies you tell yourself, you can begin to tell a new truth. I began to replace those thoughts not with wishful thinking, but with deeper alignment. I did not just say, I am enough. I studied what that meant. I did not just say, I can change. I created habits that made it real. I watched my thoughts like a gatekeeper watches the entrance to a fortress. Every time an old belief tried to enter, I asked, is this true? And if the answer was no, I replaced it. Not by shouting over it, but by speaking to it with patience, like you would speak to a scared child. Because that is what most of our negative thoughts are, echoes from a younger version of us, trying to protect us through limitation. And something extraordinary began to happen. My mood changed first, then my energy, then my decisions. I started to feel stronger, not because the world got easier, but because my mind became clearer. I stopped fearing failure because I stopped calling myself a failure. I stopped comparing because I stopped thinking I was less. I stopped waiting for permission because I realized the only one I had been waiting on was me. Here is the truth. Your thoughts create the weather of your inner world, and your inner world becomes the climate of your outer life. Think in storms, and your life will be filled with chaos. Think in drought, and your life will feel barren. But if you learn to think in light, if you learn to choose thoughts that are anchored in clarity, in courage and worth, then everything outside you begins to shift slowly at first, then suddenly. But let me be clear, this is not about repeating empty affirmations. You cannot build a palace on a foundation of denial. You must go deeper. You must become intimate with the way your mind has been wired by survival, by trauma, by repetition. You must identify the patterns, not just the words, but the feelings underneath them. Because thoughts are not random. They are habits. They are rehearsed emotions. And if you do not interrupt them, they will become your reality, whether you agree with them or not. You think you are thinking, but often you are just remembering. Remembering the rejection, remembering the failure, remembering what went wrong. Your mind replays the pain because it thinks that protects you. But that protection becomes a prison. You cannot live forward if you think backward. You cannot evolve if you only recall. There must come a day when you choose to think on purpose. That is where freedom lives. Not in never having a negative thought, but in no longer being controlled by one. The power is not in perfection, it is in interruption. The moment you hear a lie and say, that does not belong here. The moment you feel fear and choose to act anyway. The moment you remember the failure but no longer use it as a prophecy. Your mind is a garden, and every day you plant something. The question is, are you planting weeds or wisdom? Are you growing doubt or direction? Are you fertilizing fear or faith? No one else can answer this for you. This is your soil, your season, your story. And do not tell me it is too late, that your thoughts are too deeply rooted, that you have thought this way for too long, because every moment you become aware is a moment you reclaim your power. It does not matter what you thought yesterday. It matters what you choose to think now. Because now is the only moment where transformation is possible. You are not your past. You are not your failures. You are not your wounds. You are not even your thoughts until you choose to believe them. And what you believe, you build. So build carefully, speak gently, and most of all, think intentionally. Because your mind is not a mirror of what is, it is a blueprint of what will be. Now I ask you, what thought have you been entertaining that no longer deserves space in your life? What sentence do you need to retire forever? And what new declaration are you willing to adopt, not just today, but daily until it becomes your default? If this spoke to you, write your new declaration in the comments below. Let this be the moment you stop repeating and start recreating. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is trapped in the same loop you are choosing to break. and subscribe to the channel if you want more than inspiration. You want elevation. Chapter 2. The Hidden Architects of Reality. Most people walk through life thinking they are reacting to events. They believe their failures are circumstantial, their moods situational, their outcomes external. But that is not the truth. That is the illusion. The real architects of your life are not outside of you. They are not your boss, your family, your past, or your bank account. The real architects of your reality are the thoughts you entertain when no one else is listening. The quiet assumptions, the unspoken beliefs, the sentences that live in the background of your mind like wallpaper, always there, always unnoticed, but shaping everything. You were told, perhaps without words, that life happens to you. But that is only true for those who refuse to think. The moment you awaken to the power of your own mind, you stop living at the mercy of circumstance and begin living by conscious construction. This shift does not come from reading quotes or listening to motivational speeches. It comes from a sacred moment of responsibility when you finally admit, if my thoughts built this life, then I can build a different one. But first, you must learn to listen, not with your ears, but with your awareness. Pay attention to what rises inside you when things do not go your way. What do you say to yourself in failure? What do you feel when someone rejects you? What story do you return to when life gets quiet? Because those stories are not passive. They are not background noise. They are blueprints. And your life is obedient to them, whether you know it or not. Your mind is not a place where thoughts just happen. It is a factory. It takes raw materials, memories, interpretations, words, and turns them into frameworks. And once a framework is built, your life will start to follow its design. Think of the person who believes they are unlucky. They will find misfortune in every opportunity, not because life is rigged, but because their filter only allows them to see what confirms their belief. On the other hand, someone who believes they always find a way will, not because they have more talent, but because their mind has been trained to look for the next door instead of sitting beside the closed one. This is not magic. It is not mysticism. It is psychology. It is biology. Your nervous system responds to what your thoughts instruct it to feel. Your body releases chemicals in harmony with your mental pictures. Your choices are shaped by your inner dialogue. So if you think small, you move small. If you think impossible, you act hesitant. If you think unworthy, you tolerate less than what you are here to receive. The shift begins the moment you decide to stop being a victim of your thoughts and become the leader of them. And that decision requires vigilance. You must become intimate with your own mind. You must watch it like a gatekeeper. You must decide what enters. You must challenge what lingers. You must replace what no longer belongs, not once, every day. This is where most people fail, not because they are not capable, but because they are not consistent. They try to change their life without changing their mental software. They apply new behaviors to old beliefs, and when it does not work, they say, "See, I knew this was not for me." But the problem is not the behavior. The problem is the blueprint. You cannot build a mansion on the map of a prison, so you must redraw the map. Start by identifying the silent scripts you have accepted as fact. I am not good with money. I am always anxious. I never finish what I start. These are not personality traits. They are rehearsed identities. If you repeat them enough, they become truths in your nervous system. But a belief is not a law. It is a choice repeated over time. And if you built it, you can also dismantle it. But dismantling is not enough. You must replace. The human mind needs direction. You cannot simply remove a limiting thought. You must upgrade it. You must feed it with a new instruction. I am learning to trust myself. I move with calm under pressure. I finish things because I value my future more than my fear. Say it again and again and again, not because you want to trick yourself, but because you are retraining your architecture. Think of your thoughts like bricks. You have been building a temple either of limitation or liberation with every single one. And every time you speak, every time you imagine, every time you interpret a moment, you are laying another brick. What kind of structure are you building? Is it one where you can grow or one where you keep hitting your head on the same ceiling? This is not abstract. This is not theoretical. If your life feels stuck, check your language. If your energy feels low, check your imagination. If your momentum feels lost, check your assumptions. Because what you become is not shaped by what happens to you, but by what you think about what happens to you. The mind is not everything because it is perfect. It is everything because it decides what everything means. Your past was not the problem. Your interpretation of it was. Your failures did not define you. Your mental script about them did. Your fears are not real. They are rehearsals of pain that has not even arrived yet. And once you see this, truly see it, you become untouchable, not because life stops being hard, but because you stop being helpless. You are not helpless. You never were. You were just thinking in loops that kept you small. But that ends now. Take back your tools. Take back your bricks. Take back the blueprint. Start again. From the inside. With new instructions. With new authority. With new awareness. And do it without drama. Without needing a breakdown. Just the simple, powerful decision: I think different now. Because I become what I think. And I am done becoming what I never meant to be. So here is the challenge. Leave a comment right now with one limiting belief you are choosing to rewrite. Speak it out loud. Let this be the day you mark your return to mental sovereignty. Share this chapter if it woke something in you, and subscribe if you are ready to rebuild everything from the thought up. Chapter 3. The mind is a mirror. What you see inside you project outside. Stand still for a moment, not with your feet, but with your awareness. Let the noise settle. Let the obligations fade. Let the opinions retreat into the distance. In this stillness, if you dare to look not with your eyes, but with your mind, you will find the truth that has been shaping your entire life. You have not been seeing the world as it is. You have been seeing the world as you are. You have been projecting your thoughts, your wounds, your expectations onto everything and everyone around you. And then you called it reality. But reality begins where your mind begins to clear, because the world outside is only a mirror, and the one holding it is you. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are, or more accurately, you attract what you think you are. This is not just emotional philosophy. It is how the universe responds to intention. If you walk into a room thinking you are not worthy, your body will betray you. Your posture will collapse. Your voice will dim. Your energy will say, I am not enough, even if your mouth is smiling. And others will respond not to your appearance, but to your vibration, because you told them who you were without saying a word. That is how powerful your mind is. You become a walking signal of your internal world. Every word you speak, every choice you make, every relationship you tolerate is a reflection of the thoughts you entertain daily. If your mind is filled with scarcity, you will find proof of lack everywhere you look. If your thoughts are rooted in fear, even opportunity will feel like a threat. But if you train your mind to expect growth, to see lessons in loss, to find peace in process, then the same world becomes a different place, not because it changed, but because you did. The person who believes they are loved moves differently than the one who is waiting to be loved. The one who believes they are capable looks at challenges as invitations. The one who believes they are safe does not flinch when doors close. Everything flows from the invisible beliefs you carry into the visible world. And your life will never rise higher than the standards of your inner thinking. This is why temporary motivation fails. You get excited, you take action, but the moment resistance comes, you collapse back into the patterns your subconscious never surrendered. You try to upgrade your circumstances without upgrading your identity. And so the old belief drags you back, not because you are weak, but because you have not changed the mirror. You are still projecting yesterday onto today, hoping tomorrow will feel different, but it never will until your thoughts do. So how do you change the mirror? You stop being passive with your mind. You stop treating your thoughts like innocent guests and start treating them like the architects they are. Every thought you repeat builds a beam. Every belief becomes a wall. Every phrase, even the sarcastic ones, "I am just always tired, nothing ever works out for me, that is just my luck," is a brick. And enough bricks placed consistently become a structure you live inside of. It becomes your emotional home. Some people live in palaces of peace, others in prisons of pessimism. The only difference is how they speak when they are alone. The mirror cannot lie. It only reflects. So if you want the reflection to change, the source must be transformed. That means going deeper than affirmations. It means doing the quiet work, the daily work, the work that feels small until one day it no longer is. You wake up and something is different, not the world, but your response to it. Not your circumstances, but your command over them. And that is the shift. It is subtle at first. You start catching yourself. You hear the old voice, the one that says, "You are failing, that you are behind." And instead of nodding in agreement, you pause. You say, "That voice is not me. That is an echo. I choose something new." And just like that, you begin turning the mirror. Every time you speak truth over fear, the glass clears. Every time you forgive yourself instead of punishing yourself, the image sharpens. Every time you hold the line on a higher standard, even when it is lonely, the reflection begins to honor who you are becoming instead of who you were pretending to be. The world will not celebrate this work. No one will see it but you. There are no trophies for mental alignment, no gold stars for internal renovation, but that is the point. You are no longer doing it for applause. You are doing it because you are tired of living inside a mind that was built by pain, by people who misunderstood you, by versions of you that no longer exist. You are doing it because freedom cannot be inherited. It must be chosen thought by thought, day by day, decision by decision. And if you stay with it, if you stay with the work, one day the mirror will reflect back something undeniable. A person whose presence speaks before they open their mouth. A person whose energy calms rooms because they have made peace within themselves. A person who does not need to prove they are worthy because their life already declares it. That person is not a fantasy. They are not a dream. They are you, cleared of the fog, reclaimed from the distortion, rebuilt by design. So I ask you now, what does your mirror reflect today? And more importantly, what do you want it to reflect 1 year from now? If this message reached you, write one new sentence of identity in the comments below. One sentence that you will choose to reflect into every room you walk into. And if this chapter touched something deeper than inspiration, if it felt like truth, then share it. Someone out there is still staring into a mirror that lies to them every morning. Let this be the beginning of a better reflection. And if you are committed to rewriting your inner world, subscribe to stay connected. This is not a journey of noise. It is a journey of becoming, quietly, deeply, powerfully. Chapter 4. Thought is the seed of destiny. You cannot escape it. The shape of your future is already inside you, silently unfolding through the thoughts you repeat every day. You do not become successful the moment the opportunity arrives. You become successful the moment your thoughts align with success. The seed of your destiny is not found in chance, not in luck, not even in hard work alone. It is buried deep within the soil of your own mind, and like any seed, it waits for your attention, your nurturing, your faith. Everything in your life begins in thought. Your confidence, your habits, your relationships, your income, your health, your peace, none of these are created by circumstances. They are first created in the dark greenhouse of your inner world. And what you think consistently waters the roots, whether you see them growing or not. But the mistake most people make is they only tend to their garden when life is urgent. They wait for failure to reflect. They wait for loss to change. They wait for crisis to get honest. And by then the weeds have overgrown. The soil is dry. The structure is cracked. Do not wait for pain to wake you. Wake now. Wake before life gives you a reason. Wake because you realize this truth. If thought is the beginning of everything, then the person who commands their thinking controls their entire life. But what does that actually mean? It means the moment you believe a thought, any thought you give it power. And most of us are giving power to lies, to fears, to inherited narratives we never agreed to. We say things like, I have always been this way. That is just my personality. People like me do not succeed. But these are not truths. These are mental scripts passed down like old furniture, familiar, worn, and completely unnecessary. You can throw them out today. You can choose something better. Because the mind is not a museum of who you have been. It is a forge, a sacred space to shape who you choose to become. Do you know what happens when a person begins to take their thoughts seriously? Not dramatically, not frantically, just with quiet precision. They start to become someone others feel before they speak. Their energy changes, their tone changes, their decisions become clearer. They move with a gravity that cannot be faked, and they do not need to convince anyone. Because when you become aligned with the highest version of your thoughts, the world begins to rearrange to meet you. This is not superstition. This is alignment. The same way a compass needle always returns to true north, your life will always bend toward the dominant thoughts you hold. If those thoughts are unworthy, your decisions will reflect that. You will self-sabotage when you get too close to breakthrough. You will say yes to what you should decline. You will procrastinate not because you are lazy, but because your self-concept says, I am not the kind of person who finishes. But when you shift that thought, when you say, instead, I am a finisher, I follow through, I make decisions in alignment with my future self, everything changes. And I mean everything. Because your thoughts are not just internal, your brain wires them into your body. Every time you think a thought, it creates a chemical reaction. That reaction becomes a mood. That mood becomes an attitude. That attitude becomes a pattern. And that pattern becomes a life. If you want to change your life, you must change your thoughts at the seed level, not just manage the fruit. So many people try to solve their lives at the surface. They read productivity books, follow new habits, try to fix their time, their money, their relationships. But all of that is external gardening. If the seed is wrong, the fruit will never be right. And you must be brave enough to ask, what kind of thoughts am I planting every day? What kind of life am I actually preparing for? Because your thoughts are not neutral. They are not background music. They are declarations. They are blueprints. They are the instructions your future will follow. And every day you speak them silently or aloud, you are building. So the only question is, are you building what you want or what you fear? Let me tell you something the world will not say out loud. Most people are living lives built by their fear. They make safe decisions, safe relationships, safe goals, all because they are following the thought, I do not want to lose. But what kind of life can be built on that foundation? A small one, a quiet one, a forgettable one. You were not born to tiptoe through your own potential. You were born to choose your thoughts like a warrior picks their weapons, carefully, courageously, consistently. You were born to think on purpose. You were born to think thoughts that build bridges, not walls. Thoughts that expand you, not shrink you. Thoughts that create strength, not scarcity. And when you do, when you stop thinking like a person trying to survive and start thinking like someone committed to thriving, you will see the evidence show up everywhere. In how you walk, in how you speak, in what you allow, in what you attract, in what you become. Because the person who changes their thoughts is not the same person anymore. They are new. You are new. Right here, right now. So I challenge you, take one thought you know is unworthy of your destiny and write the opposite of it in the comments below. Not a wish, a decision, a sentence that begins, "I now think." Let this be your seed. Speak it with power. Read it every morning. Live it. And watch as your life bends to meet the mind that created it. If this chapter gave you clarity, share it. Someone you know is planting weeds in their life and calling it truth. Show them what can grow when they choose differently. And if you are serious about building a life from the inside out, subscribe. We are not growing shallow roots here. We are planting forests. Chapter 5. The Inner Voice That Shapes the Outer World. There is a voice inside you that no one else hears. It speaks when the world is silent. It speaks before you fall asleep and the moment you rise. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it repeats, like a broken record. And though the world may never hear it, this voice is the single most powerful influence in your life. It is not your circumstances, it is not your education, it is not even your past. It is this voice, the one that interprets everything, the one that names everything, the one that decides whether you walk into life as a victim or as a creator. The inner voice is the compass, and the direction it points determines whether your life becomes a circle of frustration or a journey of freedom. But here is what most people never realize: that voice is not fixed. It is not the voice of truth. It is the voice of training. It speaks in the language you were given by others, by parents, by culture, by pain. And if you never challenge it, it becomes your life. You think it is just your personality. That is just how I think, you say. But no, that is not how you think. That is how you were taught to think. And unless you awaken, unless you intervene, unless you interrupt it with intention, it will lead you to build a life that fits your programming but not your potential. The mind is not a neutral place. It does not just store thoughts. It creates identity. It takes every experience and translates it into belief. Get rejected once. The mind says you are not good enough. Get passed over for a promotion. The mind says you will never get ahead. Try something and fail. The mind says, why even bother again? It builds walls, one disappointment at a time, and then convinces you those walls are reality. But reality is not made of walls. It is made of choices. And the most important choice you will ever make is this: will I believe everything my mind tells me, or will I teach it to speak a new language? You can train your mind. You can teach your inner voice to speak with power, not panic. You can replace the script. You can rewrite the story. But first, you must confront the lies you have been repeating. You must look at them without fear, without apology. You must say, this thought is not mine. This belief does not serve me. This voice will not lead me anymore. Most people wait for proof before they change their voice. They say, I will believe in myself once I see the result. But that is not how it works. The belief must come first. The voice must rise first. The tone must change first. Because your thoughts are not a reaction, they are a declaration. They create the energy you walk in. They create the permission you give yourself. They create the risks you take, the love you allow, the vision you pursue. And if your inner voice is timid, your life will shrink to fit its fear. But if your inner voice becomes bold, watch what happens. You will stop second-guessing your instincts. You will stop asking people to approve what your heart already knows. You will stop hesitating when life invites you to level up. Because bold thoughts lead to bold actions, and bold actions build bold lives. So how do you make the shift? Start here. Pay attention to the words you say when no one is listening. What do you tell yourself when you fail, when you are tired, when you are challenged, when you look in the mirror? If those words are critical, anxious, small, you must interrupt them, not with fake positivity, not with denial, but with intention, with a new voice. Speak to yourself like someone you respect, like someone you believe in, like someone you love. Because here is the truth. Your outer world is always catching up to your inner voice. If your voice is empowering, your actions will reflect that. If your voice is full of clarity, your decisions will sharpen. If your voice becomes consistent, your confidence will grow. Not because the world is changing, but because you are no longer doubting yourself at every turn. It is easy to think your biggest enemy is failure, or criticism, or the opinions of others. But the truth is, your biggest threat has always been your own inner voice when it is left unchecked. And your greatest liberation will come the moment you take responsibility for that voice and decide, from now on, I speak like someone who is going somewhere. From now on, I think in alignment with my future, not my fear. That does not mean you never hear the old thoughts again. They will return, they will whisper, they will tempt you to collapse into the old version of you, but every time they come back, you will have a choice, to feed them or to replace them, to believe them or to override them. And the more often you choose your future voice, the weaker your past voice becomes. This is the daily work, the invisible work, the sacred work. No one will congratulate you for it. No one will see it on the outside at first, but you will feel it in your posture, in your peace, in your presence. And one day someone will ask, "How did you change so much?" And you will smile, not because they noticed, but because you already knew. You changed the voice, and the voice changed everything. So I ask you now, what has your inner voice been repeating that you no longer want to believe? And what new thought are you ready to practice daily until it becomes your new baseline? Write it in the comments. Let this be the moment your old voice begins to fade. And if this chapter gave you clarity, share it with someone who has been living small because they have been thinking small. And subscribe if you are ready to speak, act, and become from a place of unshakable truth. Chapter 6. Training the mind like a muscle. Most people believe thoughts are random, that the mind is just a screen playing whatever movie the day throws at it. They assume some people are just born with positivity and others are cursed with self-doubt. But that is not how it works. Not even close. Your mind is not a lottery machine. It is not a genetic roll of the dice. Your mind is a muscle, and like any muscle, it strengthens by what it lifts or weakens by what it avoids. The thoughts you repeat are not habits, they are reps. Every belief you reinforce is a set. Every reaction you practice is a conditioning. And over time, your mental shape becomes the shape of your life. Think about it. No one goes to the gym once and expects to be transformed. No one lifts a weight on Monday and assumes their body will carry the strength into the rest of their life automatically. We know that building physical strength takes consistency. It takes repetition. It takes the discipline to show up on the days you do not feel like it. It takes effort before results. And yet we approach the mind like it should fix itself, like it should just know better. Like clarity and confidence are natural-born instincts, but they are not. They are built. You must train your mind the same way you train your body, with daily practice, intentional structure, progressive overload. That means your thoughts will not always feel strong at first. You will doubt. You will waver. You will fall back into old mental patterns, but that does not mean you are broken. It means your muscles are weak, not permanently just underused, and the more you train them, the more they grow. So what does it mean to train your mind? It means you stop reacting and start rehearsing. You stop waiting for life to happen and begin preparing for how you will respond when it does. It means every morning before the noise hits you, sit with your thoughts like an athlete stretches their limbs. You ask, what is my dominant belief today? What am I expecting from the world? What story am I repeating about myself? And if the answers are filled with fear, scarcity, or limitation, you do not accept them. You challenge them. You replace them. You begin your reps. You say, I am focused. I am calm under pressure. I do not shrink back from growth. And then you repeat, not until it feels good, but until it becomes true. Repetition is not delusion. It is direction. You are not lying to yourself. You are lifting. You are replacing weak beliefs with strong ones, not by wishing, but by working. And just like physical muscles, you will feel resistance. You will feel the burn. Your ego will tell you it is too much. Your past will scream that you are not built for this. But that is the threshold. That is the moment most people quit. But not you, because you now know that mental strength is built on the other side of repetition. And the longer you train, the more unshakable you become. You begin to notice it in the little things first. A moment that would have made you spiral last year now just passes through you. A conversation that once triggered insecurity now finds you unmoved. A failure that used to feel fatal now becomes data, nothing more, nothing less. And you realize your inner world is becoming fortified. You are no longer carrying your thoughts, you are commanding them. And the impact of this shift is everything. Because life will always give you stress, problems, delays, conflict. But the one thing life cannot control is how trained your mind is when those moments arrive. The world can touch your body, your schedule, your plans, but it cannot override a mind that has been trained to return to clarity. That is why mental strength is the greatest currency you will ever build. It cannot be stolen. It cannot be faked. And when the storms come, and they always come, it is the difference between drowning and rising. But you must train, even when it feels pointless, even when no one else is doing it, even when the results are not immediate. Because training is not about today, it is about who you become tomorrow. And if you build the kind of mind that does not fold, that does not break, that does not chase every emotion, it will carry you places talent alone never could. So here is the practice. Choose one belief, just one, something that aligns with your highest future self. And say it every day for the next 30 days, first thing in the morning, last thing before bed, and every time your old thoughts try to hijack your mind. Speak it even when you do not feel it, especially when you do not feel it. That is when it matters most. That is when the rep counts. And in 30 days, you will not just think differently. You will be different. Because the repetition will not just change your mind, it will rebuild your identity. You are not here to have positive thoughts. You are here to have powerful ones. Thoughts that build, not break. Thoughts that prepare, not panic. Thoughts that rise, not retreat. This is your gym. This is your training. This is your transformation. Now I ask you, what thought will you train until it becomes your truth? Write it in the comments. Let it be the first rep. And if this chapter reminded you that you are not a victim of your mind, but its leader, share it. Someone else is still living in mental weakness because they were never taught how to train. Be the one who shows them what strength really looks like. Subscribe if you are serious about mastering the one thing that controls everything else. The mind is not everything because it feels good. It is everything because it decides what everything becomes. Chapter 7. The battlefield between thought and identity. There is a moment in every human journey where we must ask the most terrifying question, who am I becoming because of what I think? Not what I say, not what I want, but what I think habitually, unconsciously, compulsively. Because long before identity becomes visible in behavior, it is sculpted in thought. And for most people, this sculpting happens without intention. They do not realize that every repeated thought chisels away at who they are, forming a structure that eventually becomes their self-image. And the tragedy is this: we do not rise to the level of our ambition, we fall to the level of our identity. And identity is nothing more than the story we keep telling ourselves, thought by thought. You think your thoughts are just ideas, but they are not. They are construction material. They are pouring concrete every day into the foundation of who you believe yourself to be. And the terrifying part is most of it was decided for you. Someone else's criticism became your self-perception. Someone else's silence became your self-worth. Someone else's abandonment became your standard for love. You did not choose these thoughts, but you adopted them. And by adopting them, you gave them the power to define you. But you can choose again. You can interrupt the construction. You can tear down the mental structures that no longer serve you, not by running from them, but by seeing them, by facing them, by realizing that your life is not limited by your talent, but by your tolerance for thinking small. Because thought is not passive. It is not just information. It is identification. You do not just think something, you become it. The more you repeat it, the more your nervous system accepts it as truth. And when your body believes a thought, it becomes a reflex. You no longer decide, you react. And you begin to protect the very prison you built with your own thoughts. This is the invisible war, the battle between thought and identity, between who you were trained to be and who you are here to become. Most people never fight that war. They retreat, they avoid, they numb, they build lives around their old beliefs. Careers that feel safe but small, relationships that feel familiar but lifeless, habits that feel comfortable but deadening. And then they wonder why they feel caged. It is not because life is unfair. It is because they surrendered their mind to the voice of fear years ago, and that voice became their name. But you, if you are reading this, you are being called to fight. Not with anger, not with aggression, but with clarity. With the courage to look your thoughts in the eye and ask, is this belief building me or burying me? Because here is the truth. You cannot become powerful if you still think like someone who needs permission. You cannot become whole if your thoughts are still fractured. You cannot step into the next version of your life if your mind is still echoing the last one. You must upgrade your identity. Not with affirmation, but with alignment. You begin with a decision: I will no longer think in a way that shrinks me. I will no longer repeat thoughts that are rooted in fear. I will no longer carry narratives that were handed to me by wounded people. And then you begin the work. You do not need to wait to feel ready. You do not need to explain it to anyone. You simply begin to think like the person you are becoming. You ask, what does my future self believe about this? And you adopt it. You act from that belief even before it feels natural. Because identity is not something you find. It is something you build. And you build it one thought at a time. This is the secret no one tells you. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not time. It is not money. It is not talent. It is identity. It is whether you are willing to think like the person who belongs at that level before you arrive. Because only then will you act in alignment. Only then will you see opportunity instead of threat. Only then will you stop sabotaging the very thing you said you wanted. If you keep thinking like a struggler, you will keep struggling. If you keep thinking like an imposter, you will keep shrinking. If you keep thinking like a victim, you will keep bleeding your power into the past. But if you think like someone who is ready, you will act like someone who is ready. And that action will become evidence. And that evidence will reinforce belief. And that belief will reshape identity. And that identity will change everything. So this is your moment, not to say a new mantra, but to choose a new identity. Not just in words, but in thought. Not just in public, but in the silence of your mind when no one is watching. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable. Yes, it will feel unfamiliar. Yes, it will feel like pretending. But that is how every new identity begins. It is not fake. It is future. You are not lying. You are leading. You are not escaping who you were. You are answering who you are meant to be. So ask yourself right now, who am I thinking like today? And who do I choose to think like starting now? Write the name of your future self in the comments. Not their job, not their appearance, their thinking, their posture, their decision-making, and every day speak to yourself as them. And if this message woke something deep inside you, share it with someone who is trapped in the identity their old thoughts created. Let them know it can be undone. Let them know it can be rebuilt. Subscribe if you are building your life from the thought up. There is no other foundation worth trusting. Chapter 8. The Language of Becoming. There is a language spoken not with words but with presence. You can hear it in someone's tone, in their posture, in the way they carry themselves through ordinary spaces. It is the unspoken language of becoming of someone who has decided to align their inner world with their highest possibility. You feel it before you understand it. You notice it not because they are loud, but because they are certain. Not because they say much, but because everything they say means something. This language does not come from study. It does not come from mimicry. It is born in the quiet decision to speak to yourself with intention day after day, until your life echoes the tone of your thoughts. You see, every word you speak to yourself either confirms your potential or cancels it. Every sentence, no matter how small, reinforces who you believe yourself to be. I always mess this up. I never know what I'm doing. People like me never win. These are not just expressions, they are incantations. Spells you cast upon your own life. Words repeated in weakness that become truth through repetition. And then you live under the weight of them, not realizing that the world you see is not the problem. It is the vocabulary you have accepted. Language creates reality. That is not poetry, that is programming. Think about it. You do not just describe your life with words, you define it. You do not just express how you feel, you create what you feel by how you speak. The person who always says, "I am overwhelmed," will begin to live in a state of mental exhaustion even when nothing has changed. The person who constantly says, "I am behind," will feel the heaviness of time closing in even when they have years left. Words are not labels, they are levers. Pull the wrong one too many times and your whole inner system begins to collapse. So the question is not, do I think positively? The question is, do I speak powerfully? Because the way you talk to yourself becomes the script of your identity, and you cannot live beyond the script you have accepted. Most people do not know they are narrating their own decline. They think they are just being honest, just being realistic. But no, what they are doing is using the vocabulary of limitation, and that vocabulary becomes a habit. That habit becomes an atmosphere, and that atmosphere becomes their reality. You have to understand the language of your thoughts is building the structure you live in. If you speak like someone who is surviving, your life will keep pulling you into cycles of struggle. But if you speak like someone who is becoming someone who expects growth, who honors progress, who affirms their worth with every sentence, then you are no longer reacting to life. You are writing it. And yes, at first, it will feel fake. It will feel like you are lying to yourself. But that is not because the new thought is false. It is because the old identity is still clinging to power. It wants you to keep speaking in the language of the past. It wants you to say, "I'm not there yet. I'm not that kind of person. I could never." But every time you reject that script and choose a higher sentence, you weaken the old narrative. You disrupt the pattern. You speak a new reality into being. This is why most people never change. They do not have a thinking problem. They have a speaking problem. They say they want more, but they speak as if they expect less. They declare limitation even while praying for expansion. And the universe listens. Your body listens. Your subconscious listens. And it responds not to your wishes, but to your words. So what do? You learn to speak like the version of you who has already arrived. Not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You ask yourself, how does the future me speak when things go wrong? How do they talk to themselves after failure? How do they speak about their vision when no one else understands it? And then you adopt that language now. This is not about pretending, this is about preparing. The words you use today are shaping your capacity to carry tomorrow. If you cannot speak victory into your present, you will not have the language to hold success when it comes. So, you begin slowly, deliberately, faithfully. You change, "I can't too, I'm learning how." You change, "I always fail to, I'm refining my process." You change, "I'm stuck to, I'm strengthening for my next season." And you repeat, not until others believe you, but until you do. Because when you believe what you say, your actions will align. And when your actions align, your life will catch up. It always does. But it starts with the sentence. One sentence can anchor your transformation. One sentence can disrupt a decade of self-sabotage. One sentence can become the rhythm of your rise. So I ask you now, what is the sentence that your future self needs you to speak today? Write it in the comments. Let it be your declaration, your rehearsal, your new reality in seed form. And if this chapter reminded you of your power, of the way language has always shaped your becoming, then share it. Someone out there is drowning in a vocabulary that is stealing their destiny. Let this be the lifeline. Subscribe if you are serious about speaking your life into existence, because the mind becomes what it repeats, and the life becomes what the mind accepts. Chapter 9. Thought is the doorway to power. Most people search for power outside of themselves. They look for it in relationships, in titles, in money, in praise. They chase it like a shadow, believing if they can grasp the next goal, they will finally feel in control. But real power, the kind that steadies your heart in chaos, that keeps you from collapsing when the world shakes, is never found in externals. It is not granted by the world. It is unlocked within you. And the key is thought. Your mind is the doorway. And the moment you step through the right thought, you become someone the world cannot shake. Do not misunderstand me. The world can still challenge you. It can still push, break, betray, disappoint. But it cannot undo you, not when your power comes from within. Not when it is built on thoughts that are chosen, not inherited. Because thought is where every transformation begins. Not with behavior, not with circumstances, with thought. The one who changes their thinking changes their experience of life, regardless of what life gives them. Think of two people in the same storm. One collapses in fear, the other rises with calm. Same conditions, different outcomes. Why not? Because of strength, not because of training, because of thought. One said, "This is the end." The other said, "This is where I find out who I am." And just like that, the storm was no longer the problem. It was the response that defined everything. That is power, and it is available to you now. Not someday, not when you figure it all out, not when you finally get the right job, or person, or body. Now, because the doorway is already open. All that is missing is the decision to walk through, to choose the thought that aligns with strength instead of survival, with truth instead of fear, with clarity instead of confusion. But to do that, you must know something essential. Your thoughts are not just passing clouds. They are choices. They are not you. They are patterns. They do not deserve your obedience just because they are familiar. You can reject them, replace them, rewrite them. And the moment you do, you step into a new dimension of self. You become someone who is not moved by temporary things. You become someone who does not chase energy. You create it. You become someone who does not collapse under pressure because you were built from pressure. Because that is what happens when you master your thoughts. You stop reacting and start reigning. And that reign is not about dominating others. It is about finally leading yourself. This is the truth most never realize. Thought is not passive. It is an instruction. Every time you think, you give your nervous system a command. You say panic and your body obeys. You say hide and your spirit retreats. But if you say, I am calm here, I am capable here, I am safe even in uncertainty, your whole system responds. Your breath deepens, your posture rises, your focus sharpens. And the world feels different. Not because it changed, but because you did. And when you change, your world begins to orbit differently around you. The people who rise are not the most talented. They are not the most lucky. They are not even the most consistent. They are simply the ones who think in a way that allows them to keep rising. And the rest? They are not stuck. They are just thinking in circles, saying the same things, reacting the same way, calling it personality. But personality is not fixed. It is formed. And it is formed by thought. So what do? You sit with yourself. You find the thoughts that are stealing your power. You write them down. You speak their opposite. You rehearse the truth until it becomes louder than the lie. You act from that truth. You speak from that truth. You build your life on that truth. And over time, something shifts. You no longer wait for confidence, you generate it. You no longer ask for approval. You own your choices. You no longer seek control. You carry presence. And presence is power. Because presence says, I am here. I am rooted. I am unshaken. I am no longer at the mercy of what happens outside of me, because I have already commanded what happens inside of me. That is the real shift. That is what makes you magnetic. Not the words you say, not the image you portray, but the thoughts you carry when no one is watching, because those thoughts write the energy that walks in before you speak. And people feel that. Life responds to that. Doors open for that. So now I turn to you. What is one powerless thought you are ready to retire? And what powerful truth will you install in its place? Write it in the comments. Let it be your key. Let it open the next chapter of your life. And if this chapter reminded you who you really are, share it. Someone out there is still living in reaction, not because they are weak, but because they were never taught how to lead themselves. Be the one who shows them what is possible. And subscribe if you are committed to building your life from the inside out. Thought is not everything because it is soft. It is everything because it is sovereign. Chapter 10. The voice that guides the future. In every moment, your mind speaks a sentence that becomes your next half hour. A brief thought ignites a chain of emotion, decision, behavior. It is not the grand gestures that shape your destiny. It is the whispered sentences behind your eyes, the silent words that run on repeat in your mind. Those are the generals leading your life. If your mind says, I cannot do this, you will fold before you even begin. If your mind says, I am learning, you will meet failure with curiosity. That inner voice is not a byproduct of your world, it is the architect, and it designs your tomorrow by the questions it asks today. Most people let this voice run unchecked. They fall asleep and wake again to negative default settings. I am behind. I am powerless. I am unlovable. They treat these statements like facts, not realizing they are simply old audio tracks they never rewrote. And so each day when they open their eyes, they hear a narrative that drags them backward. Without awareness, they remain trapped in yesterday's programming. Always asking, what if, instead of what now, always justifying inaction instead of commanding action. It is not reality, they are simply reporting their fears as truth. Yet there is a way forward. You must become the guardian of your internal story. You must listen to what you say to yourself before the world breathes its own doubts on you. Take note, when fear speaks, do not comply. When doubt asserts its presence, do not obey. When your mind whispers limitation, you respond with proclamation, not because you ignore reality, but because you steward your response to it. You choose the questions that guide your future. How will today strengthen me? What can I learn from this? How can I rise in spite of this? There is power in those questions. They reprogram your nervous system to look for resources instead of reasons to collapse. They force you to expand before conclusion. They interrupt fear with hope, and they anchor you to presence instead of past. That is the difference between someone who reacts and someone who navigates. But hearing the wrong thought is easy. Overriding it requires discipline. You must pause. You must practice. You must insist on hearing the voice of your own becoming for a long enough time that it drowns out the echo of the old mind. That means starting before the world demands it. It means rehearsing your answers before you are tested. It means writing the script even when you have no stage. Imagine the power of beginning each day with a true sentence, a sentence that speaks to who you are becoming rather than who you were. I am the kind of person who finishes what I start. I am capable of seeing the unseen path. I am grounded even when uncertainty knocks. These are not affirmations. They are declarations, strength spoken into being. They are not to be said once, but to be owned repeatedly. until they become your posture, your source, your seed. And slowly something shifts. What once overwhelmed becomes opportunity. What once rattled you becomes rhythm. What once made you flinch becomes floor beneath your feet, because your mind is not just thinking, it is translating. Translating the sentence into emotion, emotion into energy, energy into presence, presence into performance, and performance into your life. That is how champions are made, not by circumstances, but by the voice they choose to carry when no one is watching. So I ask you now, what is the sentence your future self needs you to speak today in order to shape your tomorrow? Write it in the comments as your declaration. Mean it, internalize it, repeat it, live it, because every word you speak to yourself becomes the soil of your becoming, and the mind that commands its inner voice leads its outer world. Share this chapter if it moved you. Someone you know may still be walking under old audio loops thinking they had no choice but to obey. Subscribe if you are ready to rewrite your own voice, and with it, your future. Chapter 11. The act of thinking differently becomes the proof. Here is a secret most people never hear. You do not need to wait for your mind to change before your life begins to shift. You become the proof of your new thinking. Where you once said, "I will believe it when I see it," now you lead the way by thinking it first and then showing it. You are not waiting for alignment. You are becoming alignment. Because life will never respond to passive hope. Life resonates with empowered thought and decisive action. You think differently, so you begin to act differently, and that action becomes the evidence of your new identity. What is possible when you choose a thought that feels impossible? What doors open when you lead your mind with vision instead of fear? The person who believes they are creative begins to act creatively, not after approval, but before it. The person who believes they are worthy begins to accept better treatment, not when it is offered, but as a standard, because thought does not wait for manifestation. Thought commands manifestation. It aligns your decisions, your priorities, your relationships, your energy. It becomes the invisible axis around which everything else orbits. But to live this way, you must act like you already think it. You announce it not to others, but to yourself. The statements you think become silent momentum. They shape how you respond when your schedule is full, when your budget is tight, when your body is tired, when voices demand your compliance. Because your dominant thought is not just a cognitive construct, it is a guiding force. And if you treat it like fiction, your life will stage the fine print of your uncertainty. Here is how you make it real through consistent alignment. Every time your thoughts and your actions intersect with integrity, you deposit proof into your future. You train for collision with opposition. You rehearse your new thought in situations where your old one still whispers. You choose the consistent move even if it scares you, even if it goes unseen, because every action grounded in your inner truth is a brick in the foundation of your future identity. Here is what will happen. At first, it will feel awkward. Your body will resist. Your ego will complain. Others will think you have changed, only to return to old patterns when push comes to shove. But as you persist, something shifts. The story you thought you believed begins to dissolve. Opportunity begins to respond. The world doesn't go quiet, it starts making room for you. Not because you asked, it begins to feel your arrival. Why? Because action aligned with thought becomes accountability to yourself, not the world. It rewires your confidence. It makes you trustworthy to your own inner system. It proves to your mind what your heart already knew. You are capable of thinking differently, choosing differently, becoming differently. So I challenge you now. What thought can you think today that you have been postponing because it felt too big? And what action, however small, can you take today to prove it real? Write it in the comments. Let this be your silent oath, your first act of belief becoming evidence. And if this chapter clarified that power is not in passive waiting, but consistent doing, share it. You never know whose breakthrough depends on this one moment of alignment. Subscribe if you are ready to become through thinking and acting differently. Because your world does not bend to hope, it bends to what you choose to prove. Chapter 12. When thoughts become acts and acts become existence. There comes a moment when something inside you quietly shifts. It is not loud. There is no herald. There is no notification or applause. It is the moment your thoughts stop being whispers in your mind and begin to pulse through your bloodstream. This shift happens when your internal convictions begin to align with your outward behaviors, and you see that who you are becoming is no longer separated from what you do. The barrier dissolves, thought becomes act, and act becomes your new reality. At that moment, you no longer have to wish for change. You embody it. Most people believe truth is external. They assume if their world changes, then they will change, but this is backward. The world waits, it watches, and the world responds to what you already are, not what you wish you were. When your mind, your actions, and your identity begin to operate from the same frequency, the invisible magnetism becomes unstoppable. Doors begin to open, opportunities align. You begin to move forward not because the world finally understood you, but because you no longer needed its permission. The inner voice you speak to yourself becomes the inner action you take in silence, and the outer shift you live boldly. If your internal sentence was, "I am a finisher," eventually your unfinished tasks start wrapping up. Not because discipline alone changed you, but because your identity shifted, and that shift made your actions inevitable. The person who says, "I do not quit," eventually speaks that truth without thinking about it. Not because quitting became impossible, but because quitting became unthinkable. That is the power of thought aligned with act. But this transformation is not accidental. It is cultivated. The path to becoming who you declare is paved with consistent tension between your current reality and your future vision. You feel it every time you act on an unrelenting thought. You feel it every time you choose the sentence your future self needs you to think, even when it feels like a lie to the old identity inside you. That tension is not devastating. It is refining. It is proof that the internal architecture is being rebuilt. You cannot skip this. No action taken without internal alignment will ever sustain. You cannot fake it till you make it, because the mind senses the fakeness. The nervous system rejects the misalignment. You can try acting positive for a day, but your body and presence will betray the old identity until you rewrite the thoughts behind the behavior. That is why affirmations without internal conviction feel empty. That is why plans without mental alignment crumble. The action must be planted in the soil of belief. Then results grow. Think of the person who cultivates a strong mental life. They do not simply say, "I hope I will be resilient." They say, "I am resilient." Then they live daily in small challenges where resilience is required. They respond from their sentence, not from circumstance. And after enough silent repetitions, the label transforms into identity. Resilience never becomes a mask, it becomes nature. This is the blueprint for becoming. Not luck, not talent, not external circumstance. Internal alignment. Thought becomes identity. Identity becomes action. Action becomes your life. And your life begins to speak the sentences you once only whispered. The tricky part is the in-between. The space where the old stories still have power and the new ones feel unworthy. That place where you still catch yourself hearing the old voice, you still feel fear, still doubt, still shrink. But in that place, if you persist in choosing the new sentences, something shifts. The old begins to dissolve, not because you denied it, but because you outgrow it. The mental ecosystem changes because you change the seed. For example, someone may carry the thought, "I do not belong in this room." That sentence has shaped hundreds of moments, standing on the edge, half present, unsettled. But the new sentence, "I belong where I am called to grow," it's not about arrogance. It is about rewriting inheritance. It is about acting out of belonging even when feeling unsafe. Eventually, the room begins to feel different because the presence you carry becomes your reality. It becomes your atmosphere. You walk as someone who belongs, and they finally feel it even before you say a word. But this work is lonely. It is unseen. There are no posts to prove it, no audience to validate it. You must be driven by pleasure in silence rather than applause in public. You must be motivated by your own internal standard, not external approval. You must be anchored by concept rather than reaction. That is the difference between a life built from within and one built only through reaction. You are the author of your mind, and you have the power to upgrade the script, but you must act on it. You must speak it aloud in solitude. You must rehearse it in difficulty. You must embody it in your decisions, because the life you imagine is not built by dreaming. It is built by choosing to think differently, consistently, and then walking that path set by each thought manifested into action. Think of it like radio transmission. Every thought is a frequency. Every action is the broadcast. The world receives energy long before you ever speak it. If you broadcast inconsistency, the world receives chaos. If you broadcast alignment, the world begins to change its reception to you. You become the station others tune into, not through image but through frequency, not through words but through resonance. There comes a time when your identity no longer feels separate from your life. You wake up and think, "This is who I am," and you live like it without effort. That is the turning point. Not success, not status, alignment. It is so deep you outgrow the need to be heard. Your results rise so naturally you forget how you used to doubt. You begin to speak to your mind instead of reacting to it. You live out of sentences whispered in your heart long before the world even sees them. And that is where true power lives, not in circumstance but in sovereignty. In refusing to let external events define you, in commanding your own internal world so consistently that your external world must follow. That is where kings walk, not booming loud, but quietly anchored, not seeking more, but owning more. So where is your life still out of alignment? What sentence have you adopted that is not truly yours? What shadow identity still dictates your move more than your future self? That sentence must go. Replace it. What is the powerful thought that can rewire the next 5 years of your life? Suspend doubt, even if it feels wild. Speak it, decide it, and then prove it. What act can you take today, however small, that aligns with the sentence you are claiming for yourself? Write both in the comments your new sentence and the first proof action. Let this be your silent effort witnessed by your soul, not the noise of the world. Let your commitment begin now. And if this chapter reminded you what real creation looks like, not sensory, but sovereign, share it. Someone out there is still waiting for someone to lead themselves. Be the one who becomes first. Be the one who commands the unseen. Subscribe if you are building your life not around reaction, but around revelation. Thought becomes act. That act becomes who you are, and who you are becomes what you build. Chapter 13. The Inner Symphony That Determines Results. In the stillness, the true orchestration of your life is heard not through the noise of what you do or where you go, but through the resonance of what you think and how you believe. Every thought, every belief, every sentence quietly forming inside you, this is the symphony that either soars or sags. It is not the surface moves that change your destiny. It is the internal notes reverberating through your identity that schedule the movements outside. Your outer world responds first to the energy of your inner composition, whether it is chaos or clarity, dissonance or harmony, fear or faith. And once you recognize that everything becomes sacred, every thought your conductor, every belief your instrument, every action your crescendo. Most people live out of rhythm. They let external chaos dictate their internal score. They respond rather than compose. They borrow motivation, replicate patterns, chase trends. and wonder why their life feels fragmented. They are playing someone else's sheet music, unaware that the only way to shift direction is to write their own, to rethink the chords, to rescore the soundtrack of their mind, because you will never become who you want to be by repeating the dissonance you keep playing. But you can choose otherwise. You can become a composer, a conductor, a creator of harmony. You step into power the moment you decide, I will no longer let circumstance conduct my rhythm. I will listen to the silence and acknowledge the frequency I am transmitting. I will rewrite the arrangement of my mind until my life is proof of my internal melody, not reaction to someone else's. It begins with awareness, that inner whisper. So often I think I am not enough. I keep fearing the future. I feel small at my own table. This is not identity. It is dissonance calling out for attention. Notice it, listen to it, transform it, restructure it, because every time you leave that note unexamined, it influences your interactions, your intimacy, your impact. It forms your relationships, your decisions, your courage. And once you transform that note, once you refield it with truth, power, and alignment, your life begins to hum. You become more magnetic, more grounded. You attract with equilibrium, not effort. Opportunity does not feel foreign, it feels familiar. Peace does not feel distant, it feels natural. Alignment becomes easier because your internal frequency now matches your external purpose. Every action you take becomes expression, not exhaustion. You move without the burden of proving. You create without needing applause. And results begin to align not because you chase them, but because you embody them. Like a symphony that concludes naturally after each movement, aligns your life crescendos when every internal piece is orchestrated. But it takes precision. It takes tuning. It takes the willingness to retreat into the quiet, examine your mental notes, and rescore what no longer belongs. That is the invisible work, the sacred score, the symphony no one sees until the crescendo arrives, and then suddenly they feel it. You might be thinking, this sounds great in theory, but how do I do it? You do it by holding yourself accountable to your own composition. Start by listening to the internal dialogue you have when you are alone, when you are tired, when you are challenged. Notice the phrases you repeat. Capture the songs running on repeat. Exhaustion, fear, doubt. Then ask, what is the truth? Instead, what is the frequency my future self operates on? And then begin rewriting. Speak it, act it, live it. Not just once, not just in moments of strength, but consistently, until your thoughts, actions, and identity become inseparable, until your mind ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a studio where you orchestrate your life instead of reacting to it. That is mastery. That is production. That is the moment your inner symphony becomes the sound others cannot ignore. So I ask you now, what thought pattern are you ready to transmute? What phrase repeats that sabotages your rhythm? And what new frequency will you tune into today and prove with action? Write your answer in the comments. Let this be the first note in your new score. Let your transformation begin. And if this chapter harmonized with something deep inside, share it. Someone is playing the same broken song and calling it life. Let them hear the possibility of composition too. Subscribe if you are committed to becoming the conductor of your own existence. Because the mind is everything, not because it is a battlefield to endure, but because it is a studio to master. The mindset reset, the mirror of your becoming. Now is the time to pause, not to retreat, but to reflect. You have journeyed through thoughts, rewired belief, and witnessed the seed of change take form in your inner world. But this is the part most people skip. They gather inspiration like treasure and then return to life as it was. Do not make that mistake. Transformation is not knowledge, it is alignment, and alignment demands that you stop and reset your standard. This is the mirror moment, not to check how you look to the world, but to see who you have become when no one is watching. Look back. Who were you before these pages began to speak to you? Who are you now, not just in words, but in rhythm, in posture, in presence? You might not feel completely changed. That is not the point. The point is, do you now see yourself differently? Do you respond to life with new energy? Because the real proof of growth is not what you say, it is what you no longer tolerate. The old thought you no longer obey, the small version of you that no longer fits, the fear that no longer governs your choices. This is how you measure the shift. It begins with standards. Your old self lived by reaction. You felt something and called it truth. You heard fear and called it wisdom. You avoided risk and called it strategy. But that mind led you to survive, not to thrive. Now you must define new rules. You must declare the inner code that governs your becoming, because a trained mind does not ask, "What do I feel?" A trained mind asks, "What standard do I now live by?" So let us reset the standard. From this moment forward, your thoughts must serve your becoming, not your excuses. From this moment forward, fear is not your advisor, it is your invitation. From this moment forward, uncertainty is no longer the reason you pause, it is the reason you move. From this moment forward, you do not repeat thoughts that dishonor your destiny. This is not hype, this is sovereignty. You are the gatekeeper now. You do not let any thought enter unless it earns its place. You do not let any belief remain unless it proves its fruit. You no longer carry thoughts just because they are familiar. You carry thoughts that are useful. That is how kings and queens think, not in reaction, but in design. And yes, you will slip. You will forget. You will hear the old voice. But now you have a standard. And that standard becomes the reset. Every time the mind begins to spiral, you return to your sentence. Every time life feels unclear, you return to your rhythm. Every time fear tries to take the mic, you hand it back its script and say, "This role has been recast," because the new you has new requirements. So write them. Write down 3 standards you now choose to live by. Not hopes, not ideals, standards. What do you now require of your thoughts? What do you now require of your actions? What do you now require of your emotional state? Write them in the comments, not to impress anyone, to declare to yourself, to reset your atmosphere. This is the moment where you stop being a reader and start being a reformer. This is where you stop admiring growth and start commanding it. Share this with someone who has been circling the same thoughts for years. Someone who does not need a new method. They need a new mirror. Let them borrow yours. Subscribe if you are done being defined by who you were and ready to live by what you now decide. The mind is everything, but only when you claim everything it was meant to be. The final call, become what you were meant to be. There comes a moment when the echo ends, when the voice that once said, "You are not ready," no longer sounds like truth, but like memory. When you stand at the doorway of the life you once feared and realize you are already walking in it. Not because the world changed, not because the people around you finally saw your worth, but because you decided to think in a way that built bridges instead of walls, because you trained your mind to carry the weight of the future before it arrived, because you stopped waiting to become and began being. That is what this entire journey was for. Not to impress you, not to motivate you, but to wake you, to remind you that every inch of your life begins in the sentence you allow inside your head. Every step you take or avoid starts as thought. Every future you dream of or give up on is shaped first in the quiet place where only you live. And you have now learned that this quiet place is not powerless. It is not fragile. It is the birthplace of all that matters. You are not too late. You are not too far gone. You are not behind. You are at the gate of becoming, the gate of alignment, the gate of choosing to lead your life from within, not from the chaos of the crowd. The one who thinks clearly walks differently. You no longer rush. You no longer chase. You no longer ask for permission to feel whole. You lead yourself with rhythm. You correct yourself with love. You command your energy with grace. You walk into rooms without wondering if you belong, because belonging is no longer a room. It is you. You are home. Your thoughts are no longer reactions. They are weapons. They are tools. They are blueprints. And you wield them like someone who is no longer at war with their own mind. That is the true peace. The power of inner congruence, of knowing who you are and walking like it every hour, every day, whether the world recognizes it or not. Let me say it plain. Your future is not waiting on a miracle. It is waiting on a mental decision. The shift is not complicated. It is costly. You must give up the old voice. You must walk away from the old standard. You must bury the old belief that comfort is safer than calling. You must be willing to walk alone at times. You must become the proof, not the theory, not the student, but the proof. Not just for you, for the ones who are still silent, for the ones who are still repeating their pain, for the ones who think they need more motivation, when what they really need is a mental resurrection. Let you be the one who shows them, not with talk, with transformation, with clarity in your eyes and quiet power in your movements, with thoughts that sharpen you instead of shame you, with a rhythm that says, I am no longer waiting to become, I am becoming now. So let me ask you one last time. What will you now think that you were once afraid to believe? What sentence will guide your next season? What standard will your actions reflect? What future will your presence declare even before the world sees the evidence? Write it in the comments. Let it be your final commitment, your invisible vow, your call to embodiment. And share this book with someone who is ready not for more noise, but for a new mind. Let it be their mirror, their reminder, their final permission to rise. Subscribe if you are walking this path of transformation, not just in theory, but in thought and in truth. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. Now go become what you were meant to be.